Welcome everyone to Black Sci-Fi TV. I'm your host, Maurice Waters, where we do our best to inspire your imagination. And for this month, the month of February 2021, we're celebrating Black History Month, and we have some really special guests for you today. And we're talking about Black Panther, we're talking about Black comic books, and we're talking about speculative fiction. Guests we have today are Jesse Holland, Alex Simmons, and Milton Davis. Jesse Holland is joining us. He's a journalist, he's a TV commentator, he's a professor, wears many hats, writer. Welcome to the show. I want to start off with you to talk about this book. Can you tell us the name of the book and how this book came about, this anthology came about?
Okay, so the book we're talking about is Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda. It is a short story anthology written by an all African-American cast of fabulous writers, including our other two guests, which is coming out this month. It's brand new Black Panther stories, but it includes more than just stories about T'Challa. You can go into this book to find out stories about Shuri, to find out stories about Bashenga, to find out stories about the Dora Mahali. The entire world of Wakanda is in this book. And it explores the world where the Black Panther movie left off. If you're a fan of the movie, if you're a fan of the comic book, and you want to know more about these characters to get us all up and going for the eventual Black Panther 2 sequel, this is the book you should read, because it's going to teach you things about Wakanda that you never knew, and it's going to take you to places that the comic book and the movies cannot take you. So for everyone who loves Wakanda, this is the book you should have.
And where did the idea come from to do this anthology?
Well, I will tell you that back in 2018, right after the Black Panther movie came out, I was sitting in my house and I wanted to figure out what would be next. Now, here's a story I haven't told anyone else yet. So back in the early 90s, when the first Michael Keaton Batman movie came out, I went to see that movie with a bunch of my college friends. Well, soon as that movie came out, DC put out a novel called Tales of the Batman. And it was a short story collection with all of these great writers, including Isaac Asimov, writing stories about not Batman, but Gotham City. And that Batman movie changed my life because I saw what superheroes could be if you took them seriously. Not the whole Adam West, pow, biff, bam Batman, but the Michael Keaton Batman. Well, fast forward to 2018, and I went to see the Black Panther movie. Another movie that I not only changed my life, but it seemed to have changed a lot of people's lives. And if Batman deserved his own short story anthology, I knew damn well Wakanda deserved its own Black Panther anthology. So I actually called Marvel and said, hey, we need to have great writers do more than what they can do in a comic book or in a movie. Because, both of those mediums, even though I love them both, they're kind of limited. They're limited to the budget in a movie, and you're limited to space in a comic book. But you're not limited in a written word story. You can do whatever you want to. Your imagination can take you everywhere. You can explain everything. So I said, let me go to some friends, people I know love the Panther just as much as myself, and you just sit back and watch what we do. And that's Black Panther Tales of Wakanda.
And let's take a step back. You just said you called up some friends, okay? Because when I look on the back of this book and I see the names that are on there, Nikki Giovanni, Tananarive Due, Alex Simmons, Milton Davis, these are people that represent the best of Black speculative fiction in our culture, and none of their perspectives are the same, right? Yet all their perspectives are important. And so when I saw that, it blew me away, and I knew we had to reach out, we had to talk to you. So tell us a little bit about how you selected Alex Simmons and Milton Davis and some of the other people.
I was at a convention in Atlanta, and this man jumped me. I didn't know nothing. When I came through, he had me tied to a chair talking about, you're going to do this story, right? Do this. I didn't have a choice. And he's a friend.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so this is something that Alex probably doesn't even remember where we first met.
Mm-hmm.
I first met Alex Simmons at the Harlem Book Fair in 2008. Wow. We were both selling books. I was selling my first book called Black Men Built the Capitol. I had driven up from Washington, D.C. in my truck with my own tent in the back, parked illegally on the street, got a ticket, hauled all my stuff out there, and I'm walking down the street, and there I run into Alexander Simmons. Now, he didn't know who I was, but since I was a comic book fan, I knew who he was. Mm-hmm. So that's where I got my first autographed copy of Blackjack, which I still have. The cover that's actually right behind you.
Oh my goodness.
And Alex said to me then, because I remember telling him that I was a nonfiction author, but I always loved comic books. Mm-hmm. Alex said to me then, don't give up on the medium because there's always space for good writers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I have followed and known Alexander Simmons ever since then. Milton, I will tell you, Milton and I haven't met in person, but every single person in this book, either I picked out individually or someone else in the book that I knew them and said, you got to get this guy. So everybody in this book, either we all know each other or we have that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon where somebody in the book knows the next person and could vouch for their work. And I will tell you, I bought at least one book from every author on the list. Before I even call, even with a recommendation, before I even called them, I read something that they wrote to make sure that they were of the quality that I expected them to be, and everybody knocked it out the park.
Awesome. And so, as you talk about Alex Simmons, if you could tell us, Alex, a little bit about the background. I mean, we know who you are, but the audience doesn't, and I want to make sure that they do. And know about those 2 posters behind you as well.
Okay. So as you know, Alex Simmons here. I'm a freelance writer and have been for a number of years. I'm also the founder or co-founder of the Kids Comic Con because I do a lot of things to empower young people in terms of their imagination and their goals for the future. We can't have people beating down folks thinking that there's nothing for us in the future. I mean, when I say folks, I mean our folks, but I mean kids in general. There's a lot of negativity. So I've gone up against that. I've written Batman, Tarzan. I've created these 2 characters behind, well, it's the same guy. Blackjack, African-American soldier, fortune in 1930s. I've written a number of novels. There's a lot of work that I've done, and I tend to get tongue-tied talking about it because I realize how much I've done. But ultimately, I'm a storyteller, and I love telling good stories. I love mystery and adventure and fiction. I've read comics all my life. I've had the opportunity to work in the field and go from DC to Archie comics. I've got to write Scooby-Doo and things like that. And now I have my Marvel badge, thanks to Jesse here. I can now put Marvel right next to Penguin and Random House and DC and all that. I can run that gamut. It's a funny thing because you mentioned Nikki Giovanni, and I'll just make this quick. Something about being a creative, which all of us are, even before we are hitting it professionally or we're at somewhere along the ladder heading towards the top rung, we seem to somehow find each other. And I was like 19 years old, which is a million years ago. I was 19 years old and working at the CBS Broadcast Center here in New York City, and a young Black writer was being interviewed on a show, and I ran into her after her interview, and I knew her, I'd heard of her. I'd read some of her work, and I was just talking to her on the steps, and the next thing I know, we are hanging out for the day, tooling through Manhattan. I'm going shopping and helping her carry packages, and we were just talking. That day was one of the best days of my life. Didn't see her again for 30 some odd years, and then run into her at a convention, at a comic convention. And I'm talking about Nikki Giovanni.
Wow.
And I mean, she was just as vibrant and as remarkably talented then as 30 some odd years, 40 some odd years later, when I'm running into her and she's a professor at a college and she's doing this, she's got these books out. And we were still able to just right there, vibing and talking and about creative stuff. And so when I saw her name on the book, I just, oh, okay. You know, the universe is trying to tell me something.
Right.
You know, this is real. And Jesse, you know, just some of the other people that I respect very highly. So I'm honored to be a part of this project. I had fun with the project. And I think it represents a lot of what I've tried to stand for, which is really Black people have had a number of banners hung on us. But the thing that we need to sort of carry as our own is not only our own pride and sense of self as a community and a race and all that, but to know that we belong in this world just as much as everybody else on the planet. Thereby, we need to be seen everywhere. We need to be seen as a part of the tapestry because we are. You know, some other people's myopic viewpoints aside, we are a part of it. So weaving us into the media, exposing or exploring our history. And one of the reasons I set Blackjack back in the 30s is because I wanted to be able to talk about some of the things that we did and other people of culture did at that time that is still hidden, that's still unknown, that's still passed over. So I think that, you know, one of the things, and you brought this up, and I'm going to jump to a question you threw out there earlier. What does Wakanda say about the, you know, Black community now and all? Wakanda was, to use another piece of literature, Wakanda was Camelot in Africa, you know, and not just olden day Africa when people think of huts and spears and things, but to make it this highly remarkable technological wonder, and then to have it be an unconquered region of Africa, so it was never colonized, so that it's pure. It says that all of the myth and lore and power and education and beauty of that world can come out and be shared with the rest of the world and impact on the rest of the world. The same way we've looked at so many other tropes and mythologies and so forth from Japan or China or Europe or wherever else. So to me, Wakanda is our chip in this game. It's our coin. It's the golden spear that we place right next to everybody else's and say, here it is. And whether you see it as a historical piece of work or a totally fictional piece of work, I don't know that King Arthur was all as wonderful as everybody's portrayed him in all the movies either. But if you accept that, you can accept this. So I feel like this is part of what Wakanda represents. To us, it's that world that we can embrace and say, yes, we are that good, we are that strong, we are that smart. Let's carry that forward.
And I thank you for that comment. And I think that's a great way to segue right into Milton Davis, who, you know, I've known for years. And I you know, he is a writer, but I also consider him sort of like an activist or an advocate for that kind of inclusion, or really beyond that inclusion, to say, hey, you know, we are great. We have all these beautiful stories and imagination, you know, that goes beyond the everyday, you know, and the books that he's written, and, you know, the conventions that he's tried to coordinate, and just always networking and working with people. And Milton, if you can, you know, introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the books and, you know, what attracted you to this project.
Okay, well, I'm Milton Davis. I am a author, and I'm also a publisher. I specialize in science fiction and fantasy based on African and diaspora culture and traditions. And I got into this about 15 years ago. I've been playing with publishing and writing for a long time, off and on, ever since I graduated from college. But when I turned about 45, I sat there and I said, you know what, you probably got more years behind you than you got ahead of you. So wasn't that something that you always wanted to do? And I said, well, I always wanted to write and I always wanted to publish. And I came around about the same time where print on demand was really taking off and self-publishing was really taking off. And the ideal I had, the way I wanted to do it, I wanted to write science fiction and fantasy based on our culture. And my research told me that if I was to approach the mainstream publishers the way that they were then, that a lot of my stuff probably wouldn't be published. So I had experience having my own business. So I said, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write these stories, and I'm going to do it myself because I wanted to tell the stories my way. I didn't want to have to deal with people changing it and trying to alter it so it will fit what the keywords are, a universal audience. Honestly, I was writing for Black people. And I wanted to tell my stories a way that I felt like Black people would want to receive them. And I also felt like if they're good stories, they're going to cross over anyway, because a good story is a good story. So I had my little plan together, had my first 3 novels that I wanted to write, and started rolling them out there, and got good response from it. And once I started to get my books out there, I also started thinking about other Black authors who were looking for opportunities to be published and probably were writing stories that weren't being accepted because of what they focused on. And that's when I started to publish. And that's the main reason I started the anthologies, because the anthologies were a way to give other authors the opportunity to publish the same kind of stories. Mm-hmm. And some of our first anthologies like Griots, which I had the opportunity to co-publish, co-edit with Charles Saunders, basically was given other people to tell sword and soul stories, which was basically sword and sorcery based on African pre-colonial African culture. And we have a lot of, if you look at that, the table of contents for that particular anthology, you will see a lot of people who are right now doing very well in mainstream publishing. And some of them who were like first published in that particular anthology, So I've kind of like tried to continue that from that point on, building on to it. As far as how Black Panther came into it, I have to confess that I'm probably the least knowledgeable in this whole group when it comes to comic books. And it's kind of bad because my best friend and my closest cousin both are big comic book fans. I mean, I spent hours in comic book stores where they would like read 15 comic books and buy one. So I've been around comic books for the longest. And when I went to see the Black Panther movie, it was kind of funny because a lot of people who knew me and knew what I write about, they were like, man, I'm looking at this movie and I'm thinking about some of the books I read by you, some of the stories I read by you. Right. I'm looking at the city of Wakanda and I'm sitting there with my wife. I'm like, yeah, they got that from Mali right there. And they got that from South African culture. And my wife's like, shut up and watch the movie. Because I'm over here commenting on all this stuff, So right. To me, it was great because I'm like, this is seeing some of the stuff that all of us have been working on all these years being presented in a big way. Right.
Right. So and I think that also is good because it also shows that the market is proven. A lot of what you've written, to me, it's good that you didn't know comic books, but you know African folklore, you know the culture, because that's a whole nother aspect that needs to be brought into this when we talk about Wakanda and, and the resources and the things that we see and the images that we see.
Yeah, I look at the fiction as being kind of what we call edutainment. One of the best things I've seen that when people have read my Changa series that takes place in East Africa is that a lot of people didn't know about that history of the Swahili city-states. And they read the book, and I actually had a guy from Australia get in contact with me. And he said, look, I knew nothing about that history. And I read this book and then I went and looked it up and I saw that this stuff was actually took place. And that's been the beauty of doing, what we do the way we do it is because not only are we entertaining people, we're expanding people's minds about the culture and what it's about. Because I can give you a history book and you can fall asleep looking at it. You can get to know Changa. And so you want to know about the places that Changa went, and you want to know about the things that he did there, and that brings in the history, and it makes the discussion more interesting. Mm-hmm. And as far as the Black Panther thing was interesting because actually, like Jesse said, a friend of mine, Glenn Paris, got in contact with me. He said, "Hey man, is this guy named Jesse Holland? He's working on this Black Panther anthology, and I was, I told him about your stuff, and I was like, cool, let's talk about it." So I finally talked to Jesse, and he was so excited about it. And got me so built up about it. And then I saw some of the authors that were there, and a lot of them are authors that I know, that I've met. Some of them are authors that I've had a chance to be in anthologies with. And then what basically it was basically sealed the deal for me when I saw Nikki Giovanni.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go.
And I said,
Right.
hey,
Sorry, my mom's raised me a certain way. I have got to acknowledge that we've been joined.
Yeah, I was getting ready to get to. Yeah. That look, we saving the best for last, Alex. I know.
Okay, well, I'm just acknowledging it's good to see you. Okay, that's
Right. So we can go. We'll go right on, Milton, and we'll come back to you in a minute. So this joined us is Sheree Renée Thomas. Now, Sheree, I've known for years, and you really can't talk about Black speculative fiction without talking about her and her work. We're talking about the Dark Matter anthology that she did, the follow-up to that, Reading the Bones, her new book that she has. And, Sheree is somebody who, comes from left field with her imagination. And so I like to see that. I like that because it challenges me, whether I'm uncomfortable with it or not. It's always a different original experience. And, Sheree has traveled around the world, to talk about Afrofuturism and Black speculative fiction, Black sci-fi, whatever we're calling it today. She's really been that kind of ambassador for that. And so her, being involved in this book, again, is like a no-brainer, and it really excited me to see that you were a part of that. So number one, welcome to the show, Sheree. And number two, I'd like to hear about, your interest in the book, how you got involved in it, and how do you see Wakanda in terms of Wakanda versus the real African diaspora?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Hello, Jesse. Hello, fellow writers, Alex and Milton. Big fan of Black Panther, obviously. I'm in Memphis, which apparently, as far as I know, was the largest U.S. market in the country. We went back to see that movie repeatedly. We had church buses of people to go and to support it. In fact, our local news did a big story on Jesse Holland, of course, because of his novel, who is the Black Panther. And everyone knew that was like, part of the inspiration, for this amazing movie. And so I was there with my mom and family and friend and in my costume.
Oh, you did some cosplay. Yeah, okay, who were you?
So when you see that story about Jesse, you're gonna see me in the background. At the time, I had a gigantic afro, but yeah, I was in my Wakanda outfit.
Okay,
because we were in there fully. I mean, when I tell you it was wall to wall, it was wall to wall to go see that of all people. I'm so excited. So the Black Panther. Let's put it back like this. I used to work in a independent Black bookstore and art gallery here in Memphis called Gallery 350, run by a woman named Sandra Burke, who's a legend here by herself, just because of how she helped so many college students and young people in her various roles. And of course, we sold comics in there and anything that was Black related. We also closed Static and all the other publications, because there weren't that many Black comics then. Of course, there's a huge number of independent Black comics you can get. But at the time, it was our brother, Static and Black Panther.
Right.
For the most part. So I wasn't one of those children who could afford to buy comics every week. And my parents were like, oh, you're going to go to the library, which, of course, comics don't hold up well in public libraries. So I am probably with Milton in terms of the comic book experience. But in terms of the Black Panther was on top of that. I got involved from Tananarive Due and Jesse. So thank you to Tananarive. And it's just been a wild adventure ever since. Just very excited. Unlike some of your audience, I've had a chance to read all the stories now.
Okay.
Yeah, because I want to know Jesse or Alex.
Special treatment there.
Oh, no.
Alex, that's because you don't read your email.
You got to read your email, sir.
I didn't. Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later.
But can we get a little sampling of some of the stories? Can somebody, Jesse or somebody tell us some of those?
Before we jump into that, Maurice, let me just say this real quick.
Sure.
I had individual conversations about their stories with all three of the other guests. It was like we knew each other like that. Once again, I had never met Milton. The first time I got Milton on the phone, he and I talked for 45 minutes. Milton doesn't know this, but I was standing outside in a parking lot of a store talking to him. But we all had that immediate connection where we just clicked, not only as Black Panther fans, but as African-American writers.
Yeah.
We have all been through a lot of the same things. And believe me, the circle isn't that big. We all know people, either know each other or we know someone who knows someone.
Yeah. Right,
so
right.
It was just a huge pleasure, especially during this year of the coronavirus, to be able to sit and talk to people who know where you're coming from. And then I had the pleasure of seeing all of their stories, seeing all of their ideas just blossom and turn to these great stories that ended up in this book. Because I mean, and don't ask me which story I like the most, because you know what? I'm gonna say mine, because I wrote one too.
Okay, all right.
My story, I think, is the best because you know you got to toot your own horn.
Right, right.
But I will tell you that everybody knocked it out the park. All four of us wrote about a completely different part of Wakanda. We did not duplicate, nobody came close to doing the same thing. All of us did something completely different. All of us write completely differently. But if you want to read really good stories, you cannot go wrong by reading any of the stories in the book.
Okay, and that's good. So we want to hear a little bit of a tidbit of some of these stories. I know there's a Killmonger story. I know there's a Dora Milaje story. Like, can you give us some sampling, guys, on what you wrote about or why you wrote that story?
Well, okay, so I'll start because you know, of course, my story is the best. So,
okay.
So my story comes from a simple question of the Black Panthers have always said that they are the followers of Bast. But what if Bast had other children? Who does Wakanda belong to? And that's where my story picks up.
Wow. Okay.
You know, Odin has Thor.
Right. Right.
Zeus has Hercules.
Right.
Who says Bast doesn't have a child?
Right. Wow. Okay. Alex?
I was going to let Sheree go first because she.
Okay, Sheree.
Okay. My story is called Heart of a Panther. And my story explores a question I was left with thinking about T'Challa and his relationship to the rest of the world, right? So my story takes us out of Wakanda, back and forth out of Wakanda, into the Mississippi Delta. It takes us into the South, you know, and the question is, who are the lost and who are the found? Yeah.
Wow. All right, Milton.
Well, my story actually came from the research I was doing, and actually, it's a story within a story. There was a series of comic books where T'Challa was talking to a character, and he told him the story about Bashinga, and about how Bashinga kind of dealt with some of the situations right after vibranium was discovered. And I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it was something that kind of meshed with what I write as Sword and Soul. So it could automatically just popped in my head. So basically, what I did was take that story and expand it, and add some more details in it. So it's basically Wakanda meets Sword and Soul.
Nice. And Alex?
Yeah, mine. It's interesting. Mine's called "And I Shall See the Sun Rise," and that's SON. And I looked at it from, you know, a lot of people, when they think about, especially people who know the Black Panther through the movie predominantly, they think of his mother as the woman they see on the screen. And believe me, she was a beauty to behold. But they don't realize, a lot of people don't realize that's not T'Challa's actual birth mother. And so I wanted to go back and look at the woman who brought him into the world. And when I did some of my research, I found out that she also was of scientific mind. So it appealed to me already that we have a strong woman. We have a woman who is very intelligent. We have a woman who had to stand up for a number of principles she had in a circumstance that was going against her. And this is the woman who gave birth to T'Challa. And so I wrote a story about his mother and an incident that occurred to her while she was pregnant with him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wow. These are all strong stories. I mean, any one of them could be a novel in and of themselves, or a continuation in the movie, you know, pulling from that. You know, unfortunately, I know they're not pulling from this folklore when they do this with the movie, at least not yet anyway.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it's definitely a book that we need to check out, that we need to read and honor the works that all of you have done. You know, not just here within, you know, the confines of Wakanda, but, you know, also just writing about, you know, expression of Black people wherever and whatever level they may be.
May I share one really quick story that ties into what you're saying now? I'll be very fast.
Sure, of course.
Okay. Years ago, I was fortunate enough to be working on a project writing stories based on some of the Disney films. So the Lion King was one of them. And I actually came up with a story about how Scar got his scar. And I did some other things for them. That was years ago, back in the 90s. Recently, I was interviewed on a podcast by a young Black man. And we were talking. And he suddenly revealed to me that he realized upon researching me for the podcast that I had written those stories back then that he had read as a child, and part of what that had done is inspired him to become a writer and to be involved in the medium. Mm-hmm. Right? So we're sitting there talking now, and I'm seeing the effects of something I did years ago. And what that says to me now is because you even said a moment ago about they're not pulling from, what we have done coming from the heart and the head and the mind and the spirit that we are, you know, all of the writers involved in this, once it's out there, we have no idea what effect it's going to have on whomever, but it will have effect. There will be people who will be touched, moved, inspired, whatever, by these stories. And I think that is something I think that all of us can be proud of, that we did try and give our best work, that we had this opportunity to share this experience and to know that, yes, out there are young people as well as up the ladder of age who will find something in these stories, any one of them or all of them, that will help them move forward just that next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, kudos to Marvel Comics for, you know, letting this project happen the way it happened, and, you know, letting you select the right people.
Yeah.
It was what I consider it to be. And, you know, just, you know, one last question, because Alex, you got me thinking about something. And, you know,
I'm sorry, I'll try not to do that again.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I start thinking about things. But, you know, I know that you've traveled around the world. You know, you've been to Russia, you've been to other places. Sheree, I know you've been to other places around France and everything. And I really like if you could share your perspective on how the outside of the bubble views our community and what we do and our creativity, because I look at what Afro futurism and Black sci-fi and, you know, all the terms that we use sort of as the new Blackness, meaning that, you know, in the 60s and the 70s, you know, there was a stake put in the ground and said, this is who we are as Black people. Now I feel like with the next generation that's bubbling up, you know, they're really looking to define it in their own way and to make it something, and it's a mixture of, you know, our history of where we're coming from and also these projections into the future. So, you know, I'd like to hear, you know, some of the perspective from other countries on their interpretation of what we're putting out there, if anybody.
Sheree?
I think it's an interesting question because now you're here in the 21st century. There is kind of a resistance to what people perceive as American-centric narratives that are coming out. Just in general, Americans tend to think of the world from just being in America and everything else being ancillary and, you know, to that. And so there is always like kind of a push to create space or to have space where other people in the diaspora have voice. Not that they don't where they are, but it doesn't seem to have the same impact as when African Americans in particular in the diaspora create and innovate things and also challenge things. We're here in the mouth of the beast. There are many beasts around the world, but we're in the middle of it. And often what we end up doing becomes the innovator and also the standard bearer for what happens in other places. I'm just thinking of Black Lives Matter. We're here, you know, suffering from that and fighting and challenging that generation after generation, right? And then what we're doing here now gets picked up in other places because they're facing similar issues as well wherever they are. And so, but it's African Americans who have given it visibility, have given it a name, have given it power. And so people are able all over the world to pick up from that and have courage and to refine it and to do it and move it in the way that they need to do it where they are. Right. So there's an admiration, but also a little bit kind of a jockeying for independence and space. So, but we're always the innovators. No doubt about that. So I will say that. And even when we're talking about the Black Panther, even though the Black Panther is an African character, right? It's coming out of America, right? With American centric ideas. So having it, being in the world and now being something that everyone can kind of add their story to it and change and shape it in a way, because it's our Black Panther and their Black Panther and everyone's Black Panther. It's an interesting time to see that and to hear how watching the film, how reading the comic books, how hopefully reading this anthology, gives other people in the world, other Africans in the diaspora, just more presence, more visibility,
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, you mentioned earlier that I tour a lot and I get to speak in other countries. Two quick things. One, when I was in Russia in 2017, I was brought there to a comic book convention in Moscow. And it was an international event. And there was about 3 or 4 brothers from Nigeria that were there. I'm sorry, 2 from Nigeria and 1 from the Congo. And I was talking to some of them, but everybody else was from other parts of Europe. And there was a lot of speech giving. And at one point, some ambassadors had spoken, someone else had spoken. And then I hear my name being announced. And every couple of words, it's in Russian, every couple of other words, I hear the American, the American, the American. So I asked my translator, I said, okay, what is he saying? He said, oh, well, they're introducing you. You're going to be speaking. I said, oh, well, I didn't know that. Nobody told me. Okay, but I'll go up there. I'll do that. That's fine. And I get up there. And again, they're finishing the introduction, the American. And at that point, as I look around, just before I even open my mouth, I'm looking around this room, this huge room. I am the only American there. So as I speak, I'm not just speaking as Alex Simmons. I'm not just speaking as a Black man or an African American. I am speaking as the American. And I'm realizing people are meeting their first American right here. And something my mom's used to say to me about how to present yourself as yourself, and we like to coin that as come correct, so here I am. This is who I am. And yeah, whatever else you want to add to that, but this is who I am. And as I toured around, I spoke in several places during that year in Serbia, in Russia. I've done things online with kids and people in Africa, in Ireland, in the Netherlands. I've gone to the Netherlands and spoken in Amsterdam. They meet us. And if they have preconceptions, they get to either drop it or challenge it. And how we respond teaches them who we are. So any one of us going anywhere, if we're meeting resistance, okay, we will deal with that and we will show who we are. They may see us as a representation of every one of us, but they're going to meet who we are. I think that right now, and especially when I was speaking to college students in other countries and predominantly rooms full of white folks, they're curious, they're open, the stuff that I was told when I was leaving here, oh, they're not gonna this, they're not gonna that. I said, I can't use that. I'm gonna represent. If I get stuff, I'll deal with it, but I'm not going in there looking for it. And that's just the thing. Yeah, you'll find it some places, but it's not the thing. The thing is, who are you? And what is it you have to say? And the last thing I'll say is I'm in a room with about 20 college students at this in St. Petersburg, Russia. It's And they're asking me, do you think the rest of the world really cares about our stories or our comics? Because they're seeing themselves as Russians, and they know, or they think they know, how the world sees them. And I'm thinking this, I'm hearing my mom in my head, I'm hearing civil rights things, and I'm hearing all this stuff, and I'm saying to them, throughout my years, and I point to the gray in my beard, I said, throughout all my years, I have heard stories about Russia from non-Russians. Don't you think it's about time we start to hear your story from you? And you see the looks on their faces it's like they had not thought about that. So who we are and what we've gone through and how we see our struggle, guess what? It's not the original struggle. And some people will see us just like they did with Ira Aldridge, you know, in the 1800s. They will see us as a symbol of that change and that possibility. So we just need to be who we truly are and then deal with it from there.
Yeah. And now you guys know why he's in the book. So, you know, just in closing, you know, I'd like to hear, we start with Sheree and end with Jesse, you know, just some of your upcoming projects that you're working on that come out in February or after February. If you guys can just tell us a few of those. Sheree, if you want to start.
Okay, hi. So I am the new editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, the 10th editor in its 7 decades history. It was founded in 1949. And so I have taken on leadership, editorship for that. And my first issue will be out, the March-April issue. So that's Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. And I have a debut collection of short stories, 9 Bar Blues, stories from an ancient future that came out from Third Man Books. So that's happening. And I will co-host the Hugo Award ceremony in Washington, D.C.
Nice.
Over the summer. And so I'm excited about that.
Can I be your friend?
Of course.
Thank you.
So it's just lots of adventures I'm looking forward to in 2021. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Milton?
Well, for me, in February, I'll be dropping the second book to my Amber series. Amber is a middle grade series about a young African-American girl who has a connection with Africa through her grandmother. And she has special powers that she's been working, that she's been using to kind of like free a hidden African city that's been hidden from the rest of the world for 1,000 years. But I'm dropping the second book in February. It's called Amber and the Enchanted Sword. I'm also going to be continuing my funk anthology series with the release of Cyberfunk, which is basically a cyberpunk anthology from a African diaspora perspective.
Awesome. Alex?
Oh, okay. Well, first off, there's this Black Panther Tales of Wakanda book. It's out. It's available now. So, you know, that's a celebrational thing for me in this February. I'm as I think I mentioned, I'm the co-founder of the Kids Comic-Con, which has been this 14-year annual event. And we just, we're receiving a grant that we are working on right now. The grant's it's a reimbursement grant. So we're working on these projects to bring comics and imagination to underserved young African-American men, as well as others, but in particular, the underserved population, especially because of coronavirus, people being sequestered in their homes, the level of education and opportunities diminished for a lot of 2020. So we've been given an opportunity to try and do a push to help, you know, get more information in and bring more out of those young people. So that's another one. I'm writing afterwards to 4 omnibus on Asterix, the character, the French comic character. I get to write the afterwards about that. And I have 2 Blackjack books dropping this year. One will be towards the end of February. And last but not least, I'm teaching mystery writing. So I have an online course that I do, but it's live and everything. And so that's one that's coming up in March that I'll be teaching there. So it's open to writers, young, old, whatever. If you're struggling, I will help you find the way. So that's me for the next couple of months.
Awesome. And last but not least, Jesse.
Now, why I got to follow all that?
So you're the leader here, man. You made all this happen.
Complete. But I'm a Southerner, so there's a story to everything. So remember when I told you earlier that I met Alex in 2008 at the Harlem Book Fair? Alex told me then that comics do not have to be fiction. You can take some nonfiction and do a good comic book out of that. So I will tell you that my first nonfiction comic book will be coming out from DC this year, where I do a autobiographical comic book for them. That's going to be part of one series that they're doing. Wow. I'm also working on my next nonfiction book. And now because of all this, I'm thinking like, I could fiction it up a little bit. But I am writing the story of one of the first African-American slave cities in the U.S. Capital Region called Freedmen's Village. It was a city that sat where Arlington National Cemetery is right now, and it was founded by the freed slaves of Robert E. Lee. I've been wanting to tell this story for the last decade, so I'm going to make a little shift, and I'm going to go back to my nonfiction roots, and I'm going to tell that story. Hopefully that book will be out either in 2021 or 2022, and I'm still working on some more comic book projects I can't talk about quite yet, but you know what? Just like all of your other guests, we always try to stay busy because the story is what counts. If you got a good story, it's got to be told. I have a couple other good stories that I really want to tell, so I'm trying to get those out there.
Right. And you know, and in saying that, you know, we got to have all of you back. You know, with your individual projects, you know, we can come back and talk about the anthology again after we've all read it. And, you know, maybe the audience may have some questions or something as well. You know, so I really want to thank everyone here for taking time out to be on the show and to create these projects, and, you know, let you guys know that we are proud of you. We're looking for the products. We're looking for the projects. We want to read, want to learn. I want to hear about that city now. And, you know, thank you. And, you know, just keep on keeping, as we say. And, you know, enjoy the rest of this year. And hopefully, you know, we can get rid of this pandemic and things are much better at this point. But if it's not, we're going to keep on writing and keep on creating.
Right.
So again,
thank you for having us on, Maurice. Really, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And one more quick plug, you know, Black Panther Tales of Wakanda available everywhere right now. Go out and buy copies for your friends. Let them know that you support African American science fiction. Get out there. Don't only buy this book, buy the books of all the authors, because I've read a bunch of their stuff. I promise you'll love it.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.